Hello, hello, hello. Hey everybody, Andrew here. Excited to be with you all. Hopefully I'm coming through loud and clear. Thanks for your patience while I got the stream up and running. Really appreciate that. Oh man, look at all the awesome people in chat. Thank you very much for showing up. Hope we're gonna have a good stream, good Q&A today, good opportunity to showcase a bunch of stuff, new stuff, exciting new things. I'm gonna change, let's see, this needs to be slightly smaller. There we go. That will do. Just moving some things around very slightly. Perfect. Hear me loud and clear. Perfect. All right, great. Let me put on a little bit of background music too, and then let me balance that. And once I've got that balanced, we should be good to go. Let's try a little bit of peaceful atmosphere. Let's dial this down just a little, maybe. Why don't you let me know if we're getting a good balance between hearing a little bit of that background music, but not too much of that background music. Hopefully I am striking a pretty good balance between the two. Let me know though. Hello, Drental. I am having a good day. Thank you. Thank you. I'm trying this new stream manager view on my iPad underneath my monitor, but the chat is really small. How do I make the chat bigger? There's got to be a way to do that. No, that didn't do it. That's really weird. You'd think that, like, getting a clear view of chat would be, like, a very obvious thing that you would want to have on this. Settings button pop out. Nah, I'm not on the main. I'm trying on the Twitch app. There's like a new stream manager on the Twitch app. So you have like a stream dashboard on my iPad here. It's like I don't know how new it is, but it's a thing. I hadn't used it before. And so I was going to give it a try. But the actual like video part of the stream is too big. I need like more chat and less video. I don't really need to see myself quite as much as that. Oh well, anyways, fair play. Yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. Today's gonna be a dev Q&A stream for Foundry VTT version 12. Really big new version that we've been working on for quite a while, and it is now entering the user testing phase, which is the final phase of development before we call it stable and release it into the wild. So yeah, this is a really exciting time to be kind of surveying all the things that are in Foundry V12, to be, you know, showcasing some things, showing off some new features, and then also you know, thinking about for the community, is this approaching a point in time where you would be interested in testing V12? This is a good point for us to collect user feedback. Of course, this is not a stable release yet, so if you do want to help us with testing of user feedback, then definitely please do so with caution and prudence. Don't make it your main game. Don't upgrade your main installation. Install Foundry V12 separately. Make sure to back up your data. Use the awesome new backups feature that we launched in V11. Take backups, try things out in V12, and then, you know, play your main games still in the safety of V11 for now. But we are getting very close to V12 stable, so it's going to be a really good time for folks to start looking at it, whether you're a developer thinking about your own modules, packages, systems, or whether you're just a happy Foundry user who wants to play with the new toys and give us feedback to help us, improve them before these things get to a final release. So that's where we are in the development process right now. I'm going to spend today talking through a bunch of really awesome new features that Foundry has that we've been working hard on, take questions from the audience, maybe do a giveaway or two, and that'll be the plan for the stream. So thank you all for joining me. I hope you find this to be interesting and informative, and go ahead and throughout the stream throw your questions into chat. I do prefer it if you kind of preface your questions with like an all caps question, just so that I can easily like pick those out from other things that's just more like back and forth chatter. So yeah, without further ado, we can jump into it. It's been 2 releases since our last dev stream. We did a dev stream following the Prototype 2 release back in like late February, but we didn't actually do a dev stream in March. We were too busy deving. So here we are now again, and we've got 2 releases since the last one to get through. So we've got development phase 1, 12.3.18, and then we've also got 12.3.19, which is the most recent one. I'm going to try and showcase both of these things, and then yeah, I may be wrong. Did we do a dev stream after dev 1 back in March? I'm like looking at these notes for dev 1, and it's looking like some things that I feel like I remember showing on stream, but maybe I'm misremembering. I don't know. I've I guess lost track of what the actual state is, but I think I'm going to start with the most recent release, since I think a lot of the very most recent things will kind of subsume some things that were in the prior dev 1. So Nath says final prototype had a live stream. Okay, well, I'm going to start from like more recent, and I'm going to work my way backwards. Once we get through some of the highlights from 12.3.19, if there's some stuff that was previously in 12.3.18 that we haven't shown on stream yet that I didn't already cover, I'll do some demos and stuff of that at that time. All right, excellent. Let's go ahead and jump into it. So 12.3.19 has some really big highlights associated with it, and I think it's a good place to just jump straight into those. So the primary feature, the sort of flagship feature for version 12, is what we're calling scene regions and event triggers. It was the winner of our Patreon community vote of what feature we ought to prioritize for V12, and we've done that. And it's something that we are really, really pleased and happy with. We're going to continue building it and continue improving it over time, but we've done some really cool work there, and I'm excited to show off to you all how some of that stuff works. So it isn't completely done. We're not yet to V12 stable. There's still things, UI, UX improvements that we want to make, new features of scene regions that we want to add still. Like, it is going to continue improving a bit, but it is most of the way there to what you will have in V12 stable now. So let's start with that, and let's get into some examples of what scene regions can do. I'm here in a world, it's running the D&D 5e system, but scene regions are not system specific, they're system agnostic. Systems have opportunities to further enhance scene regions by registering custom behaviors, but any system can do that, and every system benefits from a certain baseline of scene regions behaviors that doesn't matter which system you're using, you get access to. So why don't I pull up a scene from Phandelver and Below, our recent D&D release, and I'll use that as an example for scene regions. Maybe I'll do 1 or 2 different scenes. Let's see. I want one that's like a good mix of like indoor and outdoor. I think that would be fun. So I think this one, Cragmaw Castle, is probably a good choice. This one, yeah, this will be a good choice. I'll use a different scene for some other things once I show this one. Okay, so scene regions is a new type of canvas object that can be placed in scenes in Foundry VTT. So just like placing walls, or just like placing light sources, or just like placing tiles or measured templates, scene regions is something that you can place into your scenes. it's accessed through the sort of checkerboard, chessboard tool set in the left hand in the scene controls palette that says region controls. And once you click on that, you're going to be in the region controls view. Now, I don't have any regions in this scene yet, so you're not actually seeing anything. It's a scene that hasn't had any regions added to it yet. This is the state that it's in directly when you would have imported it from the adventure module. So let's start adding some regions, and let's show a little bit of like what they can do. I'll start with kind of a basic region. Let's imagine we have a player here. So let's have our cleric character just outside the castle. Now imagine that we want to, trigger an encounter with these goblins in this chamber down to the south, C3, C4, C7. One of the many things that scene regions can do is sort of trigger a pause in the game when your players do something. It can trigger other things besides pauses too, but a pause is one thing it can trigger. So when I'm on the scene regions palette, there's different sort of tools for drawing different types of geometric shapes. I'll just use a very simple rectangle for now, and as you can see, I can draw a rectangle wherever I want. I also can enable a force snap to grid vertices mode that makes it really easy to draw regions that are like exactly aligned to grid squares or grid hexagons. So here, suppose I'll draw a rectangle right here in this square right on the far side of the doorway. And I'll call this region something like Goblin Encounter. I'll make it maybe red since it's an encounter. That seems like danger. And as the GM, I see this little red square here that shows that we have a region here for the Goblin Encounter. Now this region's not doing anything yet, so when I configure the region, what I can do is add some behaviors to it. Now I can also configure the shapes of the region. A region can have multiple shapes. So one cool thing that I can do when the Goblin Encounter region is controlled is I can actually add more shapes to it. So maybe I want the encounter to also trigger here and trigger here, like anywhere that you would like walk in a door to get into this room. Maybe I want it to also trigger here. All of these shapes that I just put on, they all are shapes of the region. And when you're on the Shapes tab of the region configuration and you hover over it, there's a little visual indicator about like which shape is which. So you can see like I've got all these little rectangles that are part of this region now. So let's add some actual like behaviors to the region. On the Behaviors tab, I'll click Create Behavior. And let's just have it pause the game. That's kind of a basic thing, like you've just triggered an encounter. I want to take a moment to narrate as the GM what's happened. So I'll add a behavior that I just call pause. And behaviors, some behaviors are very simple, like the pause behavior is extremely simple. It doesn't have much in the way of options. It's either enabled or disabled. There's also an option on the pause behavior whether it should happen more than once or only ever once. Which is useful. Like you might not want to keep pausing when someone walks in and out of the room. You might want to only do it the first time. So that's what the once option does. Now, in the region UI, I can enable or disable the pause behavior. So you can see that it's enabled now. So what happens when I take my token and I like wander over here? I'm exploring the castle. I go down here, I open the door and I step into the room. And oh, the game paused immediately. As soon as I stepped into the room, it triggered this pause behavior that paused the game on me and gives the GM a chance to narrate. Now I didn't set the once option, so you'll notice if I like leave the room and then maybe go in this other door, oh, it paused again because I hit the pause region again. So you can almost think of this pause behavior as like a little sort of trap where like once you hit the trap, it triggers. And, speaking of which, you could very easily imagine, a trap having this sort of behavior as well. I see a question about does it happen when drag, not just keyboard movement? Yep, I can move in and boom, as soon as I hit the region, it pauses. And you notice that I didn't actually even have to end my drag on the target square. I actually, from the user's perspective, I'm like trying to drag the token all the way through the square. So I'm like stepping onto the far side of the square, but it still computes correctly the collision with the region, and it pauses at the very first point where you enter the region. Try and control click move. Yeah, so ruler is the same way. So if I were to measure a ruler move, it actually interrupts the ruler move as soon as I hit the pause region. So like as the player, I think I'm gonna move 25 feet into this room. I start my movement, and as soon as I hit the pause trap, it breaks my movement and pauses the game. So yeah, that's an example of just a very simple pause game behavior. There's also a number of additional things that you can do with regions. So I talked about pausing the game. You know, we know in the scene we've got a trap here. So let's add a new region behavior for this trap area. And I don't have a region behavior implemented yet for like a spike trap or a blade trap or just like a general like damage dealing trap. I don't know exactly what this trap is supposed to do, but let's just sort of show off something sort of fun that this trap can do. We'll call this a teleportation trap. And I'll make it like a kind of purpley blue. Because one of the new region behaviors that we have, that it's just an excuse for me to show it off. I don't know, obviously I don't know what this trap is exactly supposed to be, but I'll give a teleport behavior here, and we'll say, you know, warp into trouble. So my behavior that I have is once you hit this trap, it's going to warp you into a dangerous spot. So I want to actually, you know, have it maybe drop you in this room with these hobgoblins over here. So I'm going to give like a coordinate destination of this warp. And this teleportation thing is still a little bit work in progress. This actually isn't in Dev 2 just yet. It'll be in the next release, and the teleportation is going to, I think, in the end, support not just warping to a point, but also like warping into another region. But anyways, I've given this region like a teleportation trap, like you see here. What happens when I walk my token into it? Whoop! There I am. I just warped all the way over into the other room where this hobgoblin is. So I'll have to walk. Oh, nope, sorry, didn't mean to be here. We'll walk back over this way. Oh no, I'm back. How do I get out? I'm stuck. Anyways, every time I walk into the trap, I'm like warping back over to the this hobgoblin room. Obviously, like this could be used for lots and lots of things, not just traps. But like staircases or different parts of scenes that connect to each other. I'm sure you all know those sorts of maps where like there's multiple levels of the map, but they're all actually like on the same image. So like you could imagine like the lower level of the castle is up here, but maybe like what if this map had like a part of the castle that's like the upper tower over here, and it's always a little bit awkward. Like, okay, I've got to like get the tokens when they go up the staircase. I've got to like get them over into the other area of the map, and so you can use these sort of teleport behaviors to easily do that. I see a great question about can it teleport to different scenes. That's definitely on the feature list of things that we're going to do. So it's not in the behavior yet, but by the time it makes it into the next V12 release, I'm pretty sure that this teleportation behavior will have it working so that it can send you to a different scene. Absolutely. Yeah, so that's an example of like a teleportation trap. Let's show some other cool region behavior examples that are really fun to do. And then I'll take a couple of questions and we can like show some other things. I also want to really emphasize how easy it is to add custom behavior, relatively easy it is to add custom behaviors for modules and systems. So like when you're creating behaviors like this, it's really easy for modules and systems to register new behavior types that implement specific things. Like in a different module, I've implemented some things like trap triggers and different like area of effect trap types as region behaviors. And those were like really not difficult to implement. You could trigger playing sounds, you could trigger changing the lights, you could trigger something very cool like that. So that would be something that can definitely be done. So let's show some things that are really useful for behaviors with regards to like customizing the environment of the scene. Yes, the player view does move automatically on teleport. That is correct. So environment of the scene. This is something that historically has been really difficult. I'm going to turn off this pause behavior because otherwise I'll keep hitting it. Let's just disable that. Okay, this is something that I'm like extremely excited about, so I'm going to try and hopefully explain it clearly. This is one of those tricky maps that's like a hybrid indoor-outdoor area. And so ideally, what we want in terms of the way that the game environment is portrayed is we want exterior global illumination outside of the castle in the sunlight, where the day-night cycle is active. Like it could be nighttime, it could be daytime, but we want to reflect, like, and this often even shows up in the rules, like as I read the rules entry for this castle, like light, a small amount of natural light filters through during the day, provides dim light in most areas. So like clearly the interior of the castle is intended to be darker than the exterior broad bright light of daylight. So let's see what scene regions can do to help us with that. I'm going to create a new region, and I'm going to trace the exterior of the castle. And instead of a rectangle, I'm going to use a polygon this time. And I'll just start here at this doorway, and I think I probably don't want to snap to grid in this case, otherwise I'll be a little bit too fidgety. And I'm just going to start tracing a polygon around the walls of the castle. Now, I could take my time and do this slowly to make sure I do a really good job, but, you know, in the interest of the stream, I'm going to be a little bit fast and loose here. You know, if I was really doing this to kind of like set up a premium quality map, I would take my time and really like make sure this region is exactly how I want it to be. But I'm going to kind of keep going around almost like I'm just doing walls. The snap points for these polygon edges are exactly the same as the snap points for walls. So if you need to like align your region polygon to the walling that you've done, it will snap to exactly the same place. Let's see here. Let's go in here. I'm tracing the perimeter here of like what's kind of underneath the exterior of the castle. Okay, there, I've completed my sort of fast and loose polygon a little bit. I'm going to give this just a purplish color for reference, and I'll call it castle. Okay, so now I see I've got a region called castle that traces the shape of the building. And let's give it some interesting behaviors. So the first one, let's talk about lighting. I'm going to go on the behaviors tab. I'm going to give this castle a adjust darkness level behavior. Adjust darkness level behavior allows me to define that this region has a different darkness level than the rest of the scene. Now, some options for how is it different. There's different modes. I can do override, I can do brighten, or I can do darken. So I can have an area where I hard code the darkness level to a specific value. Oh, and yes, Niallery, it's just a wrinkle of Chrome browser. Like, the drop-down menus won't ever display on screen, so I'll have to just sort of tell you what's in them. But I can either override the darkness level to a specific value, or I can relatively brighten the area, or I can relatively darken the area. Let's show what an override looks like first, but I think ultimately that isn't the best choice for this. But suppose I were to override the darkness level inside the castle all the way to 1. I can also give it some blur to make have some like nice soft edges. When I update my region, now we can see that the interior of the castle is darkened as if it were darkness level 1, as if it were nighttime. Now, obviously, there's still light sources inside the castle that are emitting light and dispelling that darkness, or light coming in from the outside and doing that. But otherwise, these areas of the castle are now quite dark. what this allows me to do is, because we'd wanted this scene to like look good when we first configured it. So usually in order to make a scene look good, you have to kind of like add a little bit of darkness so that then light sources can like take it away. We don't need to do that anymore. I can just like put the darkness level all the way to 0. We can have it be broad daylight outside, and we don't need to do that in order to have like a balance of the scene, because now the interior of the scene is like correctly darkened. The other thing that this means that I don't need to do anymore is I actually don't need to bother, like one of the other things this scene did is it put like a bunch of light sources all around the perimeter of the scene just to like sort of make sure that the outside of the castle is lit when the inside of the castle is darker. Like I don't need these light sources anymore. I can just like go around and delete all these extra light sources that are now like really superfluous, because I can rely on global illumination to handle the exterior of the scene. I don't have any more of these like exterior light sources. I don't need them. Getting rid of those light sources is good for performance. Yes, of course, now you might say you might still want one or two, like you might want one here by the door so that there's like light coming in from outside, but that would be more selective, just in places where you want to achieve a special effect. For the most part, you don't need these extra light sources anymore. And similarly, like light sources in the castle that like were previously put in there just for the purpose of like assisting with visibility, well, you don't need any of those anymore either. You can allow the area to be truly dark if it's supposed to be truly dark. You can allow it to be truly light if it's supposed to be truly light. You don't have to kind of like fight the system quite as much anymore just to sort of make it work a certain way. So I've like dramatically reduced the count of light sources in this scene down to only the things that are actually, I might have deleted one that was supposed to be a light, down to the things that are actually only emitting light. And now as I am in the token here, kind of exploring the area, I have this sort of dark dungeon exploration thing going on inside the castle, where outside it is still broad daylight. I think also because PBSO was designed for a slightly older version, we didn't get a chance to use threshold walls yet for things like light or sight restriction. So that's another thing, like especially when you start pairing this feature with things like threshold walls for Windows, you start getting a really nice effect. Like if I change this wall from like a one-way wall to instead be a proximity wall, oops, I think it's still a one-way. I need this to be both. Then like when I'm exploring this sort of dark castle, but I walk up to the window and I'm seeing outside. Why am I not seeing outside? Have I done something stupid? I don't know. It's like barely doing it, but for some reason, I don't know. Might be a V10 or what version are we on now? V12 bug. Might be a V12 bug. I'm not sure exactly why that isn't looking ideal at the moment. I'll have to look into that. But anyways, you get the idea. With Windows, you'll have a great experience with it being Fog of War. Oh, possibly. I don't know. No, there's something a little bit wonky with the amount of thresholding. It's like doing too little threshold there. It's probably a bug. I'll have to look into it. But anyways, yeah, you get the idea that there's like a very nice interaction now between the exterior illumination and the interior areas. Now, I mentioned when I was setting this up that for the darken behavior, just overriding it to 1, that's a little bit clumsy. We can do something a little bit more elegant. We can do something like do a relative darkening where we could say, like, let's set this to say, 0.66. So it's 2/3 darker than the outside. Now the interior of the castle isn't quite as dark. It's not quite as dark as darkness 1, but now the darkness level of the interior is relative to the darkness level of the exterior. So here, when it's darkness level 0 outside, broad daylight, it's dark in the castle, but it's not that dark in the castle. Since the darkness level is now relative it's a relative change. What happens if I transition the scene to nighttime? It gets progressively darker and darker inside the castle as it gets progressively darker and darker outside the castle. Now, if I had just set an override darkness level of 1, the inside would stay the same darkness regardless of the outside. But because I've set it as a relative darkening, you're able to implement a relative change relative to the exterior of the scene. Now, let me show you what the opposite would look like. Missing global illumination. Yeah, that's probably right. That's probably why the threshold wall... Maybe. Yeah, let me transition back to day. I think you're right that that's why the threshold wall... It was user error. I thought this scene had global illumination enabled, but it didn't, because again, that was like one of the sort of cheap tricks that we had to resort to with like putting light sources all around the outside of the scene in order to sort of simulate daylight without actually kind of having it. So yeah, if I put global illumination on for the scene, then yes, now I'm getting the correct window behavior that I wanted to have here. Thank you for noticing and explaining my error. I appreciate that. Who was it? Giopoluca, you are the winner of Corrected the Dev Part 1. I'm sure there will be more throughout the remainder of the stream. Yeah, so anyways, now it's darker inside the castle. I walk up to the window and I see, broad daylight outside. Everything's working really, really nicely now. Let me transition back to darkness, and it doesn't really make sense for this area, but let me show you what the relative brightening adjustment does. So imagine like the opposite effect is true, that instead of the castle being relatively much darker than the exterior of the scene, now the castle should be lighter. So if we change from a darken mode to a brighten mode, then what we have is the opposite effect. So the interior of the scene region is relatively more illuminated compared to the outside. Now, of course, that doesn't make a lot of sense in this case, but for other maps, it might, where you have an area that is relatively brighter than everywhere else on the scene. That could be like a map that's predominantly a cave, a cave system, but there's like a certain cavern that's exposed to direct sunlight or something. The advantage of doing it this way, compared to, say, just putting a light source down, is this way is linked to the day-night cycle. So if you had like a cavern cave with like a hole in the roof that's open to the sky, if you did a relative brightening using a scene region, then the effect of that would be corresponding to the darkness level of the scene. So like the day-night cycle, when it's bright outside, you'd get a big pool of light in your cavern, and then when it's dark outside, the cavern would be dark, because even though there's a hole in the roof, it's nighttime outside. So it's really elegant to be able to use regions like this to link the illumination of the scene to the overall ambient darkness level. Yeah, so there you go. That is an example of what darken can do. Now let me show something else that's really cool about scene regions. I'll go back to daylight. Regions, the geometry of a region, once you've defined the shape of a region, that region can often be used for multiple things. Like often you'll have a certain shape, like it's the footprint of a building or something. That footprint of the building can be used for more than one thing. So without scene regions, imagine we want to say, oh, it's very rainy at Cragmaw Castle. We're in a rainstorm. Oh dear, it's raining inside the castle. That's not great. What would you have to do in V11? What would you have to do historically to fix this? Well, you could use a roof tile, because roof tiles have the ability to block weather, but like we don't have a roof tile for this castle. We didn't come with it. I don't want to have to make one myself. I'll just reuse my scene region for that. So the castle region that I've already traced, the exact same region that I'm using for darkness adjustment, I can also add a behavior to it for weather suppression. So I'll call this no weather, add my weather suppression behavior, and boom, perfect. Now we are no longer having a rainstorm inside the castle because we are able to use our scene region just the same way that we would use a roof for the purpose of blocking weather. So now we have the rainstorm going on outside. We have no rain going on inside the castle. We've got our day-night cycle of the exterior area working with the darkness level of the interior. Everything is playing super nicely together, and life is good. So there you go. That's some very cool examples of like some of the things you can do with scene regions. Some of the use cases for scene regions are good for like transforming the ambience of the scene, and some of the uses of scene regions are good for scripting automated behaviors like traps or triggers or transitions between different areas of the scene, or all kinds of insanely creative applications of this framework that I know that the community is going to come up with. Y'all are going to go absolutely nuts with this feature. I know it. And I can't wait to see what kind of stuff people put together. In terms of like what are the limits of what scene regions can do or not do, like I mentioned, it's possible for systems and modules to define their own custom region behaviors, but what if you're not a system or a module developer? What can you do as, just a general user? Well, good news on that front as well. Anything that you can do with a macro, or anything you can do with a macro, you can do with scene regions as well. So if you have like a handy macro that's basically like, let's try and show an example of it. What if, oops, I forgot I still had this teleportation active. Let's try and do a script. Let's try and do we'll make our teleportation trap into a embiggen trap. And instead of a teleportation behavior, I'll get rid of that. We'll create a script behavior, and we'll say enlarge. When I'm customizing a custom script behavior, I get to indicate some certain events that triggers the behavior. So the event options, because you can't see the drop down on this screen, region shape change, behavior status change, token enters, token exit, after token move, before token move, token starts turn, token ends turn, token starts round, or token ends round. So yeah, lots of different like events that can be triggered using a macro or script like this. Let's just do a basic one where token enters or token exits. So when I assign the event here, for now, I'm just going to do a cheap trick, and I'm going to make my entire script just like debugger, and I'll save it. And then I'll bring the console up. I guess y'all aren't seeing the console because technically that's a different window. I could probably do that, but I don't really want to spend the time on it. Now when I walk into the area, boom, my console logged, and I can debug and have access to all of the different, variables and things that this event has access to. So the event gets passed a chunk of data, and let me show. Maybe it is worth taking a second just to do this. There you go. Hopefully now y'all are seeing the dev tools. And yes, I can't make it that large, so it's maybe a little bit small. But over here on the console tab, which I guess I need to pull up, otherwise it's behind my portrait, we have an event that got passed into our event trigger. It's got data about exactly what happened, what was the name of the event, what region triggered it, who's the user that triggered it. So really you can like script anything at all that you want here. So for example, let me show an example of that. Suppose we want to script our behavior thusly. Token equals event data token. Await token update texture scale x 2 scale y 2. Now, I've kind of screwed myself over a little bit here because I realized that this window does not actively resize correctly, so I'm gonna have to use a little console trick here. Not stable yet, folks, not stable yet. Let me grab a reference to this. Isn't this fun? We're doing a little bit of live debugging. There we go. Fixed it. Okay, update my region behavior. Let's see if I did it properly. Now when I walk into this area, is it gonna work? Haha, I got large. Excellent. Now let's make it a little bit better. So let's make it so where I only stay large while I am actually like still in the area. That seems like a good thing to do. I wonder why it's displaying these line break characters. That must be a editor setting. So one of the things I can do here is I'll toggle, we'll do target scale event name we'll go to double scale when you enter, otherwise we'll go back to single, normal scale. Now, of course, you'd want this to be smarter if this were going to be like a real macro or something, but I can update my behavior. Uh-oh, I didn't do it properly. Shoot. Yeah, these like break characters are not a good thing. That's always find some bugs doing these dev streams. That's one of the useful side effects of it. So thank you all for bearing with me while I try and do this live on stream. I assure you, it's much harder to do this in front of a stream audience than it ever is otherwise. We'll see what I did wrong here. That all looks valid. Yeah, that worked. I must have had just a trivial little syntax error the first time. So now we're getting large when we go in, but we're not getting small again. So I need to subscribe to the token exit event. And so that way, when I exit the area, I am now once again my regular size. So I have an embiggen trap that as I go in and out, I am getting larger and smaller. And I managed to actually successfully do this on the fly without prior preparation. So I feel at least moderately accomplished. Yeah, and in terms of the difference between a script macro and whatnot, like I could show that you can accomplish the same thing with a macro. Having it as a macro kind of makes it a little bit easier to have it be reusable. So this script that I put in here, instead of this being a script behavior, I could make this a macro and call it like embiggen. We'll make it a script macro. I'll paste the same code in here, save it. So instead of the script behavior, I'll disable that one. I'll add an execute macro, enlarge via macro. The macro behavior, unlike the script behavior, I don't have to kind of write the code in line. I can subscribe to the token enter event, subscribe to the token exit event, and I will point it at the UUID of my macro that I want to trigger. see. The UI is still a little bit of a work in progress, but now we have an enlarge via macro, which basically should be, yep, see, it's doing the same thing, but it's doing it by actually executing this macro each time you either enter or exit the region. I see some comments about the UI. I'm going to switch the left panel back to the patch notes. I see some comments about the UI. Thank you for those of you who said it doesn't suck. It is still a work in progress, but yeah, all of the UI elements for scene regions, they're all being rendered using the new application V2 framework that I'm going to talk about in just a little bit. So this little region legend up at the top that lets you easily sort of see your various regions that you have within the scene. You can kind of control one or select one. You get that feedback as you hover, like which is which. The tool buttons to configure the region, lock the region, delete the region. You can also filter it. So like, imagine you had a lot of regions in this scene. I want to look for the ones that are specifically traps. You can filter for a single, filter by name. You also can filter by elevation. So regions have elevation ranges each that can be configured. And so if you wanted like regions that are at elevation 0, now all of these are, so, I'm finding all of them, but yeah, anyways, this legend makes it really easy to select things that are in the scene. It's an idea that is a new idea for scene regions, that you get this little legend pop out when you're on this layer and it just goes away when you're not on the layer. It's a new idea we're trying. I think it works really nicely in this use case, and if others in the community end up agreeing and feeling like this legend is a good thing, we might end up adding like a similar legend to others, like sounds, lights, drawings, tiles, etc. If this type of legend would be useful. So, we'll see, but it's something that seemed like a good idea to do for scene regions, because since all of the regions can be very overlapping each other, selecting like which region you actually care about without a legend like this would be really a little bit difficult. But yeah, it's all application V2. So the region UI, all the different things here, the behaviors, this is all rendered by application V2. Very cool thing, for example, like this darken behavior form required like 0 additional code to draw this form, beyond simply defining the data model for what the darken behavior does. There's actually like no application code involved here. We have tools for the region behaviors that are able to sort of auto-generate these behavior configs directly from the data model that defines the region behavior initially. So simply for the module and system developers out there, all you have to do is actually just define your data model for what your behavior has data-wise, like what its data structures are. And then unless your data model is extremely complex, you're going to get these like configuration forms for your region behavior absolutely for free without any additional like application development work. So that's something I'm pretty proud of, how that came together. There's actually no application like UI classes for any of these behavior configs. This is obviously a bug that we have here, but aside from some of the not yet stable UI bugs that we have to solve, it's something that I think has come together really, really well. All right, so that's a little bit of a crash course on scene regions. We got rid of a ton of additional light sources in this scene that we felt like were not necessary. We made it integrate really nicely with the day-night cycle by like applying like a relative darkness. Maybe I'll put that up to 75. Maybe I want it just a touch darker. Relative darkness level, blocking weather outside. Showed like teleportation with scene regions, pausing the game with scene regions, writing a custom script with scene regions to do just about anything you want. It's cool stuff. And so there you have it. That's our flagship feature, scene regions, that is going to be... it's going to be a major, major powerful feature for Foundry moving forward. I think at the moment, it doesn't have quite enough behaviors to really like communicate at first glance how excellent it is. But I think especially as additional behavior types get developed and added into this system, it is an extremely powerful framework. Embed in particular has done tremendous work on this, and yeah, it's going to be a really, really powerful addition to Foundry that's going to be used for all kinds of stuff. Question from Mr. Forian: are regions only intended to be used as triggers, or can they be used / checked passively? Yeah, they can be used and checked passively. That's right. So yeah, so shooting through a region, like there's things that you could do there where you could use the regions to passively affect damage, armor class, visibility, things like that. I mean, you'd have to write a little bit of custom code to implement that custom region behavior, but yes, it's absolutely doable. Similarly, Guitar Guy Nick asks, can you make a scene region auto roll and push a combat encounter, push a character into a scene, generate things based on random encounter tables? You can do all of those things because all of those things can be done with the Foundry API. All of those things could be done in a script or in a macro. And so all of those things can be done by a region. Like when you enter it, you could automatically start a combat encounter. You could automatically switch the scene. You could automatically change from day to night. Anything that you can do with the Foundry API, you can now do with a triggered event in a scene region. Question from Claude Kenny LOL. Sorry if this has been addressed, but how easy is it to tie a scene region to a measured template? Not particularly easy just yet, but we recognize that use case. And it's something that we've discussed. Now, we didn't have a core solution for linking those two just yet. It is possible to do it, like a module could do it, a system could do it. I wouldn't be surprised if measured templates in the future sort of become scene regions almost in a way. Now that we have scene regions, having like a separate tool for a template is almost unnecessary, and so there does need to be some sort of linking of the two, but certainly it will be the case that like what you're going to want to be able to do is like throw out a fireball, and your fireball generates a template, and inside that template triggered events happen, like there's fire damage or there's illumination that's produced or something. And so treating templates as scene regions or having some way to link the two is absolutely in our minds and something that we intend to do as we further expand upon this this framework. Yeah, automating things like saving throws, that, you know, that also. So yeah, it's a good question, but the answer for now is not yet. Question from TD Narbed. Oh goodness. Can a template define a scene region within its bounds? I'm not sure I follow that question exactly. Question from Lord Zeal. Could we possibly have a feature that links region geometry to areas defined by walls? Select a bunch of walls, then choose create region from selection. Yeah. Whether we would provide that as a core tool or not, I don't know, but certainly it is possible to do that. If you had in theory, if you selected all of the walls in this scene, we could kind of have a tool, well, except these over here, but we could have a tool that kind of creates the outermost polygon that matches exactly the wall structure. There's a lot of like caveats associated with that though, that might not work exactly the way you envision that it would. Like, it sounds like a really good idea, but there's a lot of like little gotchas where that wouldn't actually give you exactly what you want. So I think there's a danger there of like, if we make that a core tool, people will expect it to work perfectly, but the reason it won't work perfectly is because there's theoretical flaws in the idea rather than like technical flaws that we can solve. So probably that kind of thing, at least for the time being, will be better served by like a macro that people doing like professional content development or who are doing like a lot of map creation work, you know, you'll just make that macro yourself and you'll use it yourself to make your regions. But I'm skeptical. I don't think we'll provide a core tool for it, not in the near term, at least. I don't know, maybe. I'll think about it. Question, can you use door state as a region, i.e. open or close the door triggers a pause? Not currently, but a lot of the same sort of event triggers that we have for regions might also apply to like a door opening. Certainly it is reasonable to want that pausing the game would happen like when you open the door, not when you open the door and walk in, because like when I was demoing that feature earlier and I had the pause game behavior active, I'm going to turn the encounter, like the pause game, back active again. You know, it's not really ideal that for this goblin encounter, I open the door, oh, I see that there's goblins, but it doesn't pause yet. I have to actually step in for the pause to happen. Totally agree with what you're saying, that like it would be nice if the door opening itself were the thing that caused that pause. It's a great feature suggestion. It's just not actually like a one-to-one thing we can just immediately do, because a wall is fundamentally a different thing. It's a different concept. It's a different data structure than a scene region. But yeah, continuing to put the pieces together is like, I mean, that's the future of Foundry. It's like we're, you know, integrating behaviors between measured templates and scene regions, integrating behaviors between scene regions and walls and light sources, making everything kind of work in harmony with each other. That's the future roadmap, basically. It's interesting to note, scene regions, and I guess at the time it was called event triggers. Event triggers was on the list of features that Foundry Virtual Tabletop was envisioned to have back in like Alpha 1. So I remember like in one of the very earliest Patreon releases that I ever did, like way big time pre-alpha, you know, there was like a questions from the community like what's the feature list, like what's Foundry going to have? And event triggers was like right up there on that feature list since like, you know, 2019, before Foundry was even released, like pre-alpha, beta, etc. Event triggers was like way up there. So this has always like been part of the plan. It's just for whatever reason, well, not for whatever reason, for the reasons of prioritization, we haven't been able to get to it until now. So, but like a lot of the things that we've been building for Foundry, it's been, you know, assumed that scene regions would come along eventually and provide that piece of the puzzle and be part of the puzzle that's not just on its own a feature, but part of the puzzle that's designed to work with other parts of the puzzle. So, you know, not only is scene regions a feature on its own right, but it has so many integration opportunities with lights, with tokens, with tiles. You know, I mean, have like a tile trap where you walk into the trap and the spinning blades like come out of the wall. You can do that now. You can do that because you can trigger the trap with the scene region, and you can animate the spinning blades with tiles, and you can link those together so that triggering the trap region animates your blade trap tiles, and like suddenly the building blocks exist to make a very sort of scripted or immersive experience happen. And you know, scene regions was just one of the big missing cogs in the machine. And so now that we have that cog, we can start driving other cogs with it. And that's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time, but it will happen. Yeah. All right. Let's move on to talk about some other features, because as awesome as scene regions are, they're only one feature in V12 out of a huge number of features in V12. So I've already spent an hour talking about scene regions. I need to move on. Let's talk about darkness. I showcased a little bit of this at the tail end of the last dev stream. Darkness sources now work in a very particular way. It used to be that a darkness source in a scene would just provide sort of aesthetic darkness and certain effects if you were inside it. But now, darkness sources have been overhauled to work in a superior way. So let's create a darkness source. I create a light source. Now, it used to be that to create a darkness source, you had to go turn the luminosity of the source negative. I guess it makes sense, but also a little bit awkward. Luminosity of the light source is now bounded on 0, 1. So more luminous, less luminous, but we're not ever going to negative luminosity. Instead, there is a separate checkbox for is it a darkness source. Once we make this thing a darkness source, it now works in a very particular way. Darkness sources have different properties than light sources. You'll notice that as I move this darkness source into this room, not only is it enforcing all of the change to illumination that it needs to, but as soon as it overlaps this light source in the brazier, it puts the light out. As soon as a vision source is inside it, it is effectively mechanically blinded. And more importantly, I need someplace where there's enough space to sort of look at the darkness source, so I'm going to put it back outside. From the token's perspective, you now are not able to see into the darkness source. It is an impermeable barrier. This for like magical darkness, of course. It used to be that if you'd previously seen this area, like it would be visually darkened, but you could still see into it. So now it is a impermeable boundary, magical darkness sources that you cannot see into. If I walk into the area, I lose vision as if I had, have the blinded condition. And so I lose visibility of the rest of the map because I'm inside the area of darkness. And then also light sources are suppressed by it, and most importantly, vision is blocked by it. Yeah, the light is snapping to the grid now. Lights snap to grid vertices, although you can hold shift to unsnap, and you can put the light source anywhere you want, pixel perfect. But without shift held, it will snap to like a grid alignment. I'll put on the debugging tools for a little bit so you can see what this looks like. So now from the token vision's perspective, this is like the debugging visualization of your vision that you're seeing. And so all these walls of the scene are in here, but you'll notice that there's actually all these little walls that are used for the edge of the darkness source. So the darkness source itself becomes an additional source of boundary edges for the purposes of vision computation. So like in the clockwise sweep algorithm where we're, computing what you can see and what you can't, the boundary of the darkness source, any darkness sources in the scene become additional constraining edges that block light and block vision. So I'll turn the debugging back off. I might have to, I'll have to switch the scene and come back so that it's not covered in debugging stuff. But yes, and Jinker, you might think so, but we've actually made some significant performance improvements in the performance of clockwise sweep along the way of implementing this and other V12 features. So you might think that adding these darkness sources, and yes, there is a performance cost, so if you add like hundreds of them, your performance will start to degrade. But you can have a lot of darkness sources in the scene, and you will, I'm getting 120 frames per second. I have a good computer, but I'm getting 120 frames per second, moving across the scene, computing vision every single frame, with all of these additional darkness sources included. Performance is great. Performance of the lighting engine has never been better. We're getting sort of unprecedentedly good performance metrics on some scenes that historically have been like major problem points. So yeah, performance, not to worry. I mean, you can go overboard. Everything has a cost. If you add 50, 60, 100 darkness sources, each darkness source is adding 40 or so walls. So it's about the same thing as adding around 40 walls to your scene each time you add a darkness source, which sounds like a lot, but it's not. We've tested scenes with like 5,000 walls in them, getting really good performance in scenes with 5,000 walls. So it's things are good. Things are good in the land of Foundry performance. Yeah, so that's it for darkness. Some things that are still coming for darkness, not done yet. One of the challenges with not being able to see into the darkness is you don't actually know from the token's perspective like what you're looking at. You can see, I can see it's raining outside, and I can see that there's something out there that is stopping me from seeing further, but like I don't know what this curve is that's actually blocking me. So that is a downside, something that's kind of been a step backwards in that we no longer have, from the player perspective, you don't have like a really pretty like animation of like, this is the darkness effect. That's something we're going to work on. So we're going to work on adding some new darkness animations during the testing phase that give like an animated effect at the boundary of the darkness source, so that you'll have that intuition from the player's perspective that what you're seeing here is like magical darkness, and you'll kind of have better cluing around like what is actually preventing you from seeing further. All right, awesome. Yeah, so that's a quick overview of darkness. Let's talk dynamic token rings. That's another very exciting feature that is new in V12. Not necessarily new to the D&D system, because with our official D&D release a couple months ago, we added this new feature called dynamic token rings. Now we've added this feature in core. So how does it work? When you are in your token configuration under the appearance panel, ignore the dynamic ring tab at the top. That's being added by the 5e system. For the very short term, there is a little bit of like double dipping, where the 5e system is adding some interface elements and the core is also adding. We're going to get that all sorted out. We're working on the 5e system to sort all this out and to move the 5e system to using the new core dynamic token engine. But for the time being, that is something to be aware of, is that there is that sort of duplication. Under token config, it's this section at the bottom right now that's the core ring. So all you have to do if you want this feature on is check dynamic token ring enabled, update. And this is using a top-down token, so it's not exactly like what the intended use case is for a dynamic token ring, but it's not so bad. And I think there's a lot of people that have expressed that they really like using the ring with the top-down token, because it sort of starts to feel a little bit like a mini that you're moving around, that like has a mini on a base. To each their own. It's also intended for like putting a portrait inside the ring, of course. What is it that makes the ring dynamic? Well, you have really granular control over the colors of the ring. This is a dynamically composited texture. So you have granular control over the colors of the background, the ring edge, as well as a bunch of like animated effects that you can do. So maybe I wanted to make the ring color like a nice, I'll just sort of sample the color of this gold on the token. We'll do like a bright gold ring to kind of match the token's vibe, and then maybe for the background we'll do kind of like a dark crimson. And so now we have like a, customized the base to kind of match this token a little bit more. But you also can have it have certain animations and things. So like suppose this character takes some damage, you notice how like the ring flashes and you get this like dark red or bright green, like you're taking damage or you're getting healed. These sorts of things are like little dynamic elements that happen because of the dynamic token ring and the way that it can integrate with the game system. So you can have like swirling effects, you can have ripples, you can have color gradients that are like rotating around the ring, you can color shift the ring, you can use it to have all kinds of visual cues, and it's also integrated with other sort of filter based effects. So like if the token's like invisible, I mean this happens regardless of whether there's a token ring or not, but say the token's invisible, like those things apply to the ring, like those effects can apply to the ring as well. So you can have granular control over the subject within the ring, as well as the ability to influence the ring border, the ring background, to do things that provide like a little extra level of immersive interactivity, with it. The taking damage, removing the ring color, that's a bug at the moment because the core ring and the D&D 5e system implementation are like butting heads a little bit. We need to remove this feature from the D&D implementation so that it like is sort of uncontested in core. But that's just the current state for a brief period of time today, not necessarily in the long term. So in terms of other, like these hobgoblins are designed to use the ring. They're going to need to have like a little data migration over to make sure that it uses it. But these hobgoblins that are using the ring will also get, all these like textures that are sort of designed to be used with the token ring will then work in that particular way. I think, again, there's a little bit of a bug right now with butting heads with the 5e system when you first enable it for a token that previously had the like 5e system ring. So anyways, there's a little bit of tech debt that needs to be wrangled here, but anyways, we'll get that sorted out for sure. Let's see. Yeah, so that's a quick thing. The token ring was a sort of last minute addition, and so we're going to need to continue developing it and polishing it up over the testing phase. But it is a brand new thing that it's a nice little thing that really works well for a certain style of token, and having that kind of interactive immersiveness with it is just a little extra level of polish that Foundry can do that you don't get anywhere else. And so really happy about that. Question from America96, how the app different between the image having a background and not being able to pop out of the ring and the PNG ones? So these textures, like this hobgoblin, like they use what's called a subject texture, and the subject texture, I can show what that looks like. So basically, oops, that's not a search. What have I done wrong here? There we go. That's the hobgoblin non-subject. I want to grab the hobgoblin subject. Sorry, a little bit disoriented here. There we go. So these tokens were made in a particular way where the subject texture looks like this. So it's these tokens were specifically designed in a way that's intended to be composited with our dynamic ring. So there's like a Photoshop template where like the token was made in a particular style that is like then optimized for being positioned within the ring. And so it's just a sort of style of making the token that gives it this like really nice pop out effect while allowing it to be dynamically composited with the token ring in a way that achieves all of that particular animation. The exactly which ring is used by the system, Red Dog, is configurable. So now there is a technical limitation that it's important for performance reasons that you're using like the same ring. We can try and break that assumption in the future, but basically if you're using the same ring textures, you get really great performance benefits from batching in the rendering pipeline. And if you're not, then you don't. So we don't currently support like each token having its own bespoke ring, but we do support swapping the ring entirely for like all tokens. So if you have this ring, courtesy of Kaora, who's a wonderful team member of ours, this ring comes with Foundry. So you get this just by having Foundry, but you can, if you make like a separate ring that's more of like a Pathfinder style or like a Blades in the Dark style or a Warhammer style ring or a sci-fi like Starfinder, alien ring, like you can swap out the style of ring that's used like system-wide basically. That can be done, but there's currently performance reasons why that ring swap is not done on a single token by single token basis. I'll have to double check, Jinker, but in theory, the subject tokens, the subject textures for this token ring can already be WebM. I'll have to double check that it works, but we didn't, like, a WebM texture can already be used in this capacity. So it's possible that it doesn't work. I haven't tried it, but it should, in theory, work to have an animated texture on the token ring. I can try and see. I think I have, I'm trying to remember where I have them. I've got like some, I don't know. I'll have to try, I'll try some other time. Oh, maybe they're in my, yeah, no, I don't know. I'll have to try some other time and test and see if it works with WebM. But it should. It should. All right, moving on from there. Audio, power to the people. This is a fun one that, you know, honestly, it didn't end up being that complicated, and so it's a little bit, I feel a little bit sheepish that we didn't do it before now. But suppose I open up a player view on another screen. Well, I'd have to swap the stream for that. Let me just show what would be involved. Now playlists on the playlists tab, you can right click and configure their ownership just the same way as you would do for any other document type. So I could give a player like Cobalt, I could give Cobalt ownership over this playlist, and then as a player, if I, log in as that player, I now have ownership over the playlist, and I can control it. So you can give your players the ability to play DJ here. They can change the track. They can stop and make it shuffle or soundboard. They can change anything they need to change about the playlist. Change what's playing. Change the volume. So yeah, you can put that control in the player's hands to. You can, if you want, put that control in the player's hands to allow them to, to help DJ during the course of the session. I know there's a couple of couple of DMs that I play with that like get very focused on the storytelling or running the combat or reading the rules, and they'll often like forget to change the music for like 2 hours in a stretch, and I'll just be like, can we get a different song, please? Well, now I can, as long as they trust me not to do something abusive with it. But yeah, it's up to the GM if you want to give your players permission to do that or not. In terms of creating new playlists, there's a permission setting that you can configure. So when you go to permission configuration, there's a new setting to create playlists. You can choose like which roles of players should be able to create new playlists. So you can restrict that so that like only you can create the playlist, but you can give users permission to like manage them, or you can give players permission to just create their own music playlists themselves. Yeah, awesome new feature there. Nath on our team prototyped this one as part of our free project Friday, which is a great little contribution that we partnered up on. Application V2. We've already talked about this a little bit because you've been seeing the UI for the scene regions. There's a couple other places where we're using application V2. All of the setup menu is getting converted over to app V2, but also things like this user configuration UI. Like this is now an application V2 element. And so gradually, bit by bit, we're converting the UI over to use this new framework. And I mean, I've showed this before, so there's probably not like that much new to say about it, really. But it's cool. And yeah, one thing that I guess is new that hasn't been seen before on application V2. So my browser right now is by default in light theme, in light mode. I don't have a special browser color preference assigned. But suppose at the operating system or browser level, I said I want dark mode. One thing that's quite nice is that application V2 supports preferred color scheme out of the box. So like I can just change my light mode, dark mode preference, and then this user config, the region legend, region configuration, behavior adjustment all pops over into dark mode. Now we still need to adjust some of the styles for dark mode. I think I've been mostly developing it under the light mode styles, and I think there's some aspects of readability for the dark mode styles that need improvement still. But anyways, the point, I suppose, is that that color scheme preference is built into app V2 natively. So application V2 elements, will kind of get that out of the box, that, everyone can benefit from. Eventually, I mean, question from Gambit, like, will dialogues change to dark mode as well? Eventually, once everything is converted over to use application V2, everything will support that light mode, dark mode swap. Currently, like a dialogue, like, do you want to delete everything in this folder? This is an application V1 dialogue. But once this dialogue becomes like an application V2 dialogue, then it would be either a dark mode or a light mode, as you prefer. It will be the same for everything. Journals, yes. Dialogues, yes. Everything, yes. It's just going to be a gradual process of migrating all of the interface elements over from app V1 to app V2. That will take some time. We're starting that process now. Basically what we're doing is, like, whenever we need to go and meaningfully change a UI element, we're going to go ahead and swap it to application V2 from here onwards. So, like, we needed to improve the user configuration app, so we swapped the user configuration app to app V2 along the way. The scene regions applications are all new, so we developed them from the get-go as app v2. For other things, it's going to be like as we go and touch them, or maybe we'll make a concerted effort to do like a bulk move, but it's going to be a little bit gradual. All right, let's see. Those are some of the key highlights. Dice rolling Peggy parsing is also another one that's really cool. So under the hood, when you roll a complex expression, like roll 3D, 8D, 4D6, the whole thing in parentheses, and then, the whole thing like in a dice pool where you keep the highest 2 or something like that. Like this kind of rolled expression with like lots of parentheticals and nesting and modifiers would be really awkward to do in the old dice parsing environment. So we have a new parser for the dice syntax. It doesn't really materially change the API, or it doesn't change the way that you write dice commands, really. It's just under the hood, we're parsing those strings and interpreting them in a much more effective way. And so this Peggy enhancement is a really great thing. It was initially proposed to us, I think, by Shark on the Pathfinder dev team a while ago, but Kim on our team did some tremendous work to actually like do all the legwork to take that suggestion and make it work. So this was something that is a really great enhancement for the stability and rigor and robustness of Foundry's dice rolling system. Claude asks, is there any difference in the roll object from these changes? There's like 1 or 2 new properties, but there's not really breaking changes. It's more like everything that a roll had before, it still has. It's just the way we get there is better. Zeal asks, does it have an average function? We didn't get around to implementing that. That was on our to-do list in terms of like, do we want to implement an average? And we didn't, mostly because the time required to do it versus other priorities, that trade-off was not in its favor. It's still an issue in our backlog, it's just low priority, and so I don't really expect us to get to it. Question from Zellybelly, do you have an example of one thing that got parsed for an incorrect result? I'd have to look at some of the, the GitHub issues. I think many of them had like examples of roles that, were previously, non-functional. I'd have to look at the history of GitHub issues though, and like pull out some examples of that. I'm just gonna see, like, I'm sure I can grab one here somewhere. Yeah, using dice pools for described dice parentheticals was one area that didn't work. Regarding the most recent comment, yeah, so like here's a roll expression that previously would break. Dice pool parentheses 1d10 plus 3 times 2 comma 3 times 2 keep. Now we only get the one best dice. It does actually correctly process. Yeah, I think correctly parse. Yeah, you can look through the GitHub issues for anything tagged dice in V12 for some examples to that. All right, what's next? Those were some of the highlights. Let me run through some other things. Improvements to the select options handlebars helper, lots of improvements to the Foundry applications elements module, lots of like auto-generating HTML element helpers now. That's really like part of how we're powering the application v2 interface. Some of that like automatic like data model to application generation is coming through there. let's change the scene. We need a little bit of a different vibe for a little while, maybe. Let's see, bunch of, oh, the 3 separate sliders, that's an interesting one. So as you, I'm sure, are aware, at the top of the playlists tab, there are 3 sliders. Those 3 sliders have been renamed. The 3 sliders are renamed to music, environment, and interface, but it's not just a rename. The actual functionality of it has been overhauled so that now you have control over what sound plays on which of those 3 channels. So for example, suppose we have, I'm trying to think of a good way to demo this. Okay, so I'll just be quiet for a moment, and you'll hear, of course, as I turn the music volume slider up, you're going to hear more of this music at the moment. Unsurprisingly, the volume of music is on the music slider. But importantly, the environment slider also plays a key role, and it's not just things like opening doors. So like opening or closing this door has a sound, I can make that louder or silent because it's on the environment channel. Things like rolling dice in the chat log, 3d6, I can make that louder or quieter because it's on the interface channel. Some of those things aren't new, but the things that are new is that these are actually 3 separate audio contexts now when they weren't before. Before they were just volume modifiers within the same context. What this means in practice is that you get some powerful new things, like when you're configuring a playlist sound, you can configure as the GM, is this music, is this environment, or is this interface? So imagine like your sound that you're configuring is, I'm gonna make a playlist for like ambience. And in this ambience playlist, I'll declare that this whole playlist is environment sound. I can do that either at the individual track level or at the playlist level. I can say like everything in this playlist is environment, and then I can add a track to it. I'll go grab some audio out of my my computer here. Let's see. I know I must have some. We'll do like Arena Crowd from Michael Gelfi. That's obviously not fitting for this scene, but it will be a good example. So now under my ambience playlist, this Arena Crowd that is playing, the volume of the crowd noise is going to be controlled by the environment slider. Because, oh, sorry, this track needs to be configured as environment. I might need to stop it and replay it for that. Yeah, I think there's probably when the context of a track changes, there's a bug where that's not currently rebuilding the sound for a different context, so I have to do a reload there. That's not ideal, but I'll get that fixed. Oh no. Why isn't my demo working? Troubling. It's incorrectly using the music slider. Failure to demo on this one, maybe. What have I done wrong? What have I done wrong? Yeah, it looks right to me. I'm not sure. I may have done something stupid, or maybe this feature got broken sometime between when it was implemented and now. All right, well, hopefully you all understand the intention of the feature, which is that there's now different audio channels that can be configured on a per sound level. So that gives you and your users a much better ability to kind of manage the ecosystem of soundscape that's in your scene. So if you as a player think, the music's a little bit loud, I wish I could hear the cityscape more, you can turn the music down and you can turn the cityscape up. And since those are individually addressable channels, you would be able to have that kind of granular configuration of types of sound volume. I think it's a really good feature. I wish I could demo it properly. I regret that I am not in a position to do that right now. I'll have to look into what went wrong there. These things happen on dev streams. Such is the way of it. All right, let's see. Other really noteworthy improvements. There's obviously a lot here. I'm going to kind of fast forward through, but yeah. Integrated active effects directly with the data model, so active effects can make intelligent choices about how to apply changes. This is a really cool benefit of using a data model for your system. If you have an explicit data model for your actors, for example, when you have an active effect that applies to a certain field of that data model, it now knows exactly how to apply because it knows that field of the data model is like a string field or an array field or a number field or a Boolean field. And each field type defined by your data model can have active effects that apply to it in a different way. So this is something like not necessarily so powerful or obvious to most users, but to system developers, this is a very powerful thing. The fact that your system-defined data models will now be, integrate with the active effect system in a much smarter way and more accurate, more powerful way. Another thing that is cool, we've got a bunch of new HTML elements. Like we've got this new, sort of styled select element that, that's like a custom element widget. We've got things like this new, this file picker. Like you're all used to seeing this file picker. What you're maybe not used to seeing is that this file picker is a new, actually HTML file picker element. It's not just like a mishmash of random elements and styles. It's actually like a very composed, easy to use custom HTML element. Same thing with, for example, the color picker. Like this color picker is now a special element that gives exactly this functionality, exactly this effect. So there's no more needing to wrangle JavaScript listeners in your application code in order to make sure that when you change the color of the color picker, the string changes, or when you change the string of the color picker, the color changes. These fields are now inherently linked because it's internal logic to a custom HTML element. Very useful stuff. Same with another one that we did is the range picker. Now that's not actually being used everywhere yet. I'm trying to think of some places where we're using the new range slider. I guess we're not using it on this app yet, but it does exist. Document tags, that's another one that we've added. String tags, multi-select document UUID. That was the linked macro on the scene region. So a bunch of really powerful quality of life changes for developers in terms of application development. Improved canvas performance. I mentioned that before. Really excited about that. We've got some really cool improvements to the way that objects can be managed programmatically. So I think earlier in V12, I talked a lot about PCOs, primary canvas objects. We've given the same sort of PCO treatment to light sources and edges, walls. So now walls, light sources, sprites, tokens, anything that you're drawing that affects the canvas, they can come from documents, they can come from placeables, but they also can be programmatically added. So I could programmatically add, bounding edges to the scene that would affect line of sight calculation, light calculation. I can add those edges to the scene programmatically without needing like wall documents. For most users, that means nothing, but for power users, the ability to define programmatic light sources or programmatic wall edges, supremely powerful. Yeah, so I'm really happy about that. We added some big improvements to the ruler for measuring distances. Segment-wise measurement is now vastly improved. Performance of the ruler is improved. Rendering style of the ruler is improved. The ruler API now has support for persisting a remembered history of movement. So like if a game system wants to take advantage of that, you can do things like on a token's turn, you can like remember that they made some move and you can store that as remembered history. And then like if they start moving again later in that same turn, you can like continue computing cost of movement or continue computing distance of available movement or things like that remembered what you moved before within the same turn. Now that's not something I can demo until or unless a game system actually like takes advantage and implements it. But the API framework for doing that is now part of the core ruler class. That's something that's really exciting that will make, measuring distance and movement and, integrating rules of movement with movement much more powerful. Another key cog in that machinery is the use of new scene regions. So you can imagine like the scene region that defines difficult terrain where you move through the scene region and your movement cost is increased, and it remembers that you move through a region of difficult terrain, and it remembers that you spent a certain amount of movement cost, and therefore when you do like move action, bonus action, move some more, when you get around to the move some more, you know how much further you can move actually like by the rules. This is like really powerful stuff that's exciting that we got that framework added. Let's see. Yeah, just a bunch of powerful Canvas API stuff that we managed to get in before the end of V12. I'm really proud of this work. I think some of this stuff is really powerful stuff. I talked about PEGI and dice parsing. There's some important changes there. Settings, user settings. This is something that's important to many developers. User settings can now be registered. As many of you know, if you do any development for Foundry, when you like register a setting, you give that setting a type. One thing you can do now that you could not do before is you can give your setting a type that is a data field instance. If you use a data field instance as your setting type, you get for free built-in validation, built-in like custom HTML rendering display, things like that. So using a data field instance as your game setting type is now sort of the new recommended practice for a number of reasons. So yeah, that's a little nice one that I'm quite happy about. Yeah. Let's see, then a bunch of bug fixes. Yeah, I think that's about the best highlights to focus on for 3.19. I imagine like what's in 3.18 is mostly just an overlap of this, but there's probably a few other things that are new that I would like to showcase. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick AFK, just a couple minutes. I'm going to come back. When I come back, I'll do a quick giveaway, see if there's anyone in chat who I can foist some free stuff on. And then once I've done that quick giveaway, I'll do a little survey of some things in the development 1 release that I may not have like really showcased yet in terms of things I've talked about today. All right, save your questions. I'll take more questions when I'm back. I'll be back from AFK in about 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll do this giveaway. To be eligible for the giveaway, all you have to do, but what you have to do, is to be signed in to Twitch. So if you're watching right now and you're not signed in, you might want to log in so that you'll show up in the viewer list and be eligible for the giveaway. When I get back from AFK, I'm going to grab that list and create a little roll table to draw some winners from. So I'll be back in just a minute with that giveaway, with a couple more demos, and then with just answering your questions for a little bit until we're done. So don't go anywhere. I'll be right back, and yeah, see you in a minute. Hello, I'm back. Thank you all for sticking around. Feeling refreshed, ready to do a giveaway and then cover the rest of this stuff. Let's see, this is the table for today. We got 278 of you in the giveaway table. I'm going to pull a couple of winners, and for each winner, what you need to do if you're here and if you accept your prize, you'll need to indicate that in chat. And let me turn this music volume down just a touch. I think the prizes that are on offer is you can have your choice of a Foundry Virtual Tabletop software license. If you happen to be watching this stream and don't own Foundry yet, that's a prize. You can have the House Divided adventure that you've seen some of the beautiful maps of in this stream. It's a adventure for 5th edition that's very beautiful and expansive and immersive, levels 5 to 10, that has a really amazing storyline and is a great stage for role play, if I do say so myself. Or you can have the Phandelver and Below starter adventure that I was showing Cragmaw Castle earlier in the stream when I was setting up the scene regions. That's a great starter adventure if you are interested in getting into a new game with a new group. So those are set of prizes. I guess we can put a Demon Queen Awakens option in there too if there's like a Pathfinder player out there that doesn't want D&D stuff. So anyways, yeah, there's a range of options available. You may choose one prize as a winner. I'll pull a couple of winners, and if you're here, let us know in chat that you accept, and then we'll get some prizes out your way. All right, first winner is Mecha Maya. Second winner is Manti Core Dev. Third winner, Mr. the Dimitri. Mecha Maya, Manti Core Dev, and Mr. the Dimitri. I guess Manticore Dev, and Mr. Dimitri. If any of the three of you... Where's the drum roll? Oh, posthumous drum roll. Let's see. Mecha Maya, Manticore Dev, Mr. the Dimitri. Do we have any accepts so far? Yes, Adam, that's right. They ceased. They deceased. You become a winner and you pass on from this mortal coil. Yeah, lots of M winners. What's going on with that? Maybe this Peggy parsing isn't all it's supposed to be. Let's see, Mecha Maya, Manticore Dev, or Mr. the Dimitri. I think we've got some AFK winners here. I'm giving them just a second more. All right, we're counting down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Come on. Come on. We're just trying to give away some free stuff here. All right. They're out. They're done. They're off the board. Let's draw some new winners. Let's draw some better winners. All right. Drum roll. We got Sunjammer. We got EMP fingers, and we've got Tarian 1976. Sunjammer, accept. I knew, better winners, better winners. Sunjammer, that was, congratulations. EMP fingers and Tarian 1976. We'll see if they're around. But yeah, Sunjammer, if what you want to do is you can send me a DM on Twitch and let me know what sort of prize you'd like. Foundry license key, Phandelver Below, House Divided, Demon Queen Awakens. If you want to learn more about what those are, just ask in the DM. We'll figure out what's the right prize for you. Let's see if EMP Fingers is around. We might have to cross some others off the board. All right, they're done. They're done. All right, let's see what we got. Edward Day, Edward D. Day, and Drobble. Edward D. Day and Drobble. We'll give another little round here. Try and wrangle some winners. Well, Drobble's here. That's promising. Edward D-Day accepts. Congratulations. Drobble is also here. Presumably might be accepting the prize. All three of you, please send me a DM on Twitch. Send a DM to Foundry VTT on Twitch, and let me know which prize you would like. Again, the options are Foundry VTT license key, Phandelver and Below adventure, Demon Queen Awakens adventure, House Divided adventure. Let me know which of those is most exciting to you, and we'll get some free stuff sent your way. Thank you all for watching, especially the winners, but especially those also who did not win this time. We'll be giving more stuff away very soon. Very, very soon, in fact, because next month, May, is our anniversary celebration, and that celebration will be replete with festivity. So stay tuned for many exciting things coming up next month. Lots of opportunities to see new things, new announcements, win free stuff, sales, discounts, hoopla. Yeah, there's going to be lots happening. All right, anyways, congrats to the winners. Let's talk about a few more little notes from the patch notes, because I didn't cover 2.318 yet, although it's mostly overlapping. Application v2 overlapping, Canvas QOL, sure, embed improvements. That's kind of cool. I want to show some of those. And then I also want to show the token thing. So the embed stuff, I want to try and figure out. I might have to go searching for one here because I don't know exactly offhand. I'm going to look for one of these that contains what I think is probably an embed. Let's see. Yes. Okay, cool. So here's a thing that we built when we were doing some D&D changes, but we ported it out as a core feature. So these things like these random tables in this journal entry, the spider's web, these inline random tables, they're not actually like this HTML isn't like actually directly put into this journal entry. What this is it's a corresponding random roll table right here. And then in the journal entry, we have a new syntax for embedding. You can embed either a roll table or you can embed another journal page entirely. So if you have like another page that you want to like reuse the content of and embed it elsewhere, this new embed enricher allows you to like put another piece of content embedded in your journal, and it works really great for roll tables, but there's all kinds of other embeds that we can support. And so this is now a core feature that you can do with the journal syntax to have this sort of embed behavior. Really cool stuff, very powerful for making, you know, really nicely formatted journals. There's a question about like, how do you roll it? So when you have an embedded table, you can do, I thought there was a button. There's a button certainly to like open the table, because what you can do is you can actually like click the caption and open the table. I thought there was a button to roll it in line, but maybe not. Maybe that's something we can do to improve the embed formatting, would be to like put a little like inline roll button. Yeah, Zeal, you can have kind of sort of recursive journals, although well, not exactly, because the embed enricher only resolves the immediate child, so it doesn't recursively embed. So like if you embed B in A and B embeds C, you'll only get the content of B without C. So it's not, it doesn't have like depth or recursion. It just only embeds the immediate embedded target. All right, token enhancements. I'm going to need to look up a reminder on how to do this, but I think in the issue there is some examples that I can use to show. All right, let's see here. Let's pull up a map. All right, let's show a couple of these texture transitions. All right, so now when you, this is really cool. So I need to hype this up a little bit more than I have done so far. All right, hype time. Okay, you have a token. Token texture transitions now support a variety of animation options. So when this druid token, say, becomes larger and a fundamentally different character, like a bear, suppose this druid goes from being a medium-sized humanoid to a cave bear. When that texture transition happens, as you saw there, hopefully it was a little bit fast, it was like a seamless crossfade to the new texture. Let me go back the other direction so that I can show this again. Let's see, I need to get the actor. Okay, let me show this again. And I'm trying to show this via the UI, but it's probably easier if I do it via the API. But yeah, so imagine, I didn't make him smaller, but yeah, you can imagine we're switching from, you know, one to the other, and we get this really sort of nice, seamless crossfade. Now, with the API, I can do one better, because I can customize the speed of the transition, and I can customize all of its sort of effects. So if I do this transition instead with the API, just a moment. All right, we want to do change the texture. We want to go to width 2. We want to go to height 2. And we want to use one of these beautiful animation options will show what some of the different animations are that you can choose from. Okay, everyone ready? Everyone ready? I'm about to do it. 3, 2, 1, go. Whoa. That was cool. Let's turn back into our human form. Maybe we'll go back. We'll go back. We're polymorphing. Yeah, I made it so as you can see, like in the API, I gave that a duration of 4 seconds. You can control the duration. You can also control the animation type. So that was what's called a swirl animation. But let's show some of the other animation types. This one's called water drop. It's like a ripply sort of water-based transformation. Very cool. I'll go back the other way. Yeah, nice. So someone in chat was asking, like, why not use the polymorph feature? Well, ideally, I would be using the polymorph feature. Now, ideally, like, the polymorph feature would be using this API to actually perform the transformation. So, like, this is the underlying API feature that provides animation support for texture transitions. So a feature like polymorph should ultimately take advantage of this API in order to make polymorphs look really good. Here's one called a morph animation. Probably a really good choice for polymorph, I imagine. Someone's asking, is there a way to do this centered? The reason it's not centered is because you're moving from a size 1x1 creature to a size 2x2 creature. So like your hitbox here is enlarging to here. So there's no way to enlarge from 1x1 to 2x2. Like, according to grid spaces, there's no way to do that centered. So like, the reason it's transforming this way from like top left down is because of the grid spaces that it needs to then occupy. But you could, of course, you could of course do that differently. But in this particular case, if you're staying aligned to the grid, let's show some other options. Cross hatch, it's really crazy. Here's a fun one. It's called cross hatch. Here it goes. Yeah, it's sort of like a dissolving cross-hatching fade. We've got one that's called wind. Animate the token as if it's blown by wind. There's all these different options, and they're documented in the GitHub issue. So definitely, like, for API devs looking to implement these transitions, yeah, look at the issue here that's on my screen. It's 10497. These are all the different animation types that are now possible. White noise, I'll show white noise. Kind of a old school like TV static change, good for maybe like a sci-fi effect of some kind. Hologram. It's crazy. Here's the hologram transition. Woo! Really fun stuff. Anyways, Ludovic from our team did some amazing work on making these transitions possible. So really amazing little like texture changes that are now possible through this framework. Fun times. So yeah, that's a pretty amazing effect. You don't have to change size when you're doing it. I just was adding the size transition to make things interesting. But yeah, really cool. Really cool stuff that allows those crossfade animations. Yep. Good question from Niall Rogers about primarily a Python SQL dev. What am I looking at learning to use Foundry? It's a JavaScript stack, and so yeah, it would be kind of web technologies, JS, HTML, CSS for visual styling is the family of technologies that Foundry uses. Not too many defined frameworks. We're relatively framework light. We try and use sort of like native JS as much as possible. There are a couple of key exceptions, being Pixie, which is a really powerful framework for canvas rendering that we use very heavily. All right, let's see. What else was major stuff in 12.318? Some architecture changes, improvements to the initial buffering of socket connections. That's something that I hope will be really helpful for people like on slow connections. Like, I'm sure you've all experienced the issue where like while someone is connecting to the game, someone else is like moving a token around, and there's a little bit of like desync that happens because like while someone is actively connecting, someone else is moving their token, and yeah, so that hopefully will not happen anymore because now we're buffering socket events during the connection process, and we play them back once you've successfully connected. So you should, when the new user gets fully connected, they should be like perfectly in sync with the game state. Let's see. Yeah, a bunch of application v2 stuff that I've already shown. The dark mode, light mode, we already showed. Texture transitions just showed. This is an interesting one that I didn't talk with people about yet. So I'm actually curious to end up seeing what the community makes of this or does with this, but we made a decision. Since almost the beginning of time, Foundry has had a constraint on the minimum grid size that is allowed. And that grid size, historically, the minimum has been 50 pixels. And, you know, if you can't go lower than 50 pixels. I may live to regret this, but we dropped the minimum to 20 pixels. So, I mean, obviously that looks horrible. Don't recommend it. But there are some reasons why you might want like a subgrid, for example. Like maybe instead of this token, you know, maybe 4x4 tokens are the standard, and so you want more of like a fine subgrid. Use at your own risk. I may regret us doing this, but the minimum grid size in Foundry is now 20 pixels, not 50. Please don't try and play a game session at 20 pixel grid. Please just don't do it. Or if you do it, don't tell me you did it. I don't want to know. Yeah. Let me have blissful ignorance. Let's see. Some other things about ruler measurement. I already talked about that. The embed stuff, very cool. Bunch of improvements. More UI configurability for tooltips, adventure exporter. Technical thing, we switched from FXAA to SMAA for anti-aliasing. We had to get rid of FXAA for some particular reasons. The main reasons we had to get rid of FXAA had to do with changes needed in order to support token stacking and like the interface stuff. I showed this in the last stream, but one thing that's a little bit new, like when you have two tokens like this next to each other, suppose one of them is dead, or even worse, you know, big icon dead. It used to be that this dead icon might frustratingly be like above you, and so you can't see, like it could be sort of wedged between the token on the ground and the token that you're controlling. Now these status icons, even though they're in the interface layer, they are actually rendered using an erase blend mode and some fancy rendering pipeline that allows those like status effect icons to be kept underneath like this. And that seems like a small thing, but it was absolutely not a small thing. And since it was absolutely not a small thing, we had to do some other things in terms of evaluating performance trade-offs, evaluating the way that occlusion works in terms of like radial or fade, fade-based occlusion, meaning like when you go under a tree like this. Some consequences of that is we had to switch from FXAA to SMAA. So yeah, still looks good, just a little bit of a technology change there. Added support for cost calculation and grid measurements, support for unsnapped ruler measurement. This is a new one where like you can, if you're using the ruler tool, you can measure like an unsnapped point to point. So, by default, when you're measuring with the ruler, I'll just put global illumination on this scene. By default, when you're measuring with the ruler, the ruler origin is going to snap to your grid space, and the ruler destination will also snap. Now, depending on your order of operations, you can unsnap either the start or the end point of the ruler. So if I start a measurement and then hold shift, I can measure from the center to an exact pixel. Or if I hold shift before starting to measure, I can measure from an exact pixel. So suppose I want to measure the distance from the corner to a corner. I can measure corner to corner, or I can measure just any arbitrary point to any arbitrary point with an unsnapped ruler. And it will still show you, if you're using a grid, it will still show you which grid spaces you're measuring through. I'll show a cool dashed lines hex grid. Let's do 4. Here's a dotted lines hex grid. Show some of the new grid styles. So yeah, you can have you can measure sort of arbitrary point to point, and it will show you the path that that measured move goes through. Or you can of course measure snapped, which is the default behavior. Yeah, template measurement, that's another one that's new. So there's been some major improvements to template measurement. The snapping points for the origins, here it either snaps to the center or to a hex vertex, whichever's closer. That's on a hex grid. Square grid behavior is a little bit different. In terms of configuration of settings, there's a new setting called so square grid, the combination of square grid diagonals and grid-based template shapes, this is an important change. So let me show what this looks like on a square grid. All right, now suppose we measure a circle on a square grid like this. Currently, the default behavior, of course, is that which squares are treated as affected by this template is, it's based on Euclidean computation. And so that is controversial for the rules, and in some cases, and so people have opinions about this. And so there's a checkbox for whether the area of effect of grid templates should be grid-based instead of Euclidean. So if we turn on grid-based template shapes, a 30-foot circle template using grid-based template shapes will be a square, under the assumption that you have equidistant movement. So if diagonal movement and off-diagonal movement is the same, then a 30-foot circle is a square because every square within this area is 30 feet away from the origin. However, if we were to change the square grid diagonals from equidistant to, say, exact square root of 2, then when we reload, have to reload between changing the grid configuration, but then you get something like this that's a circle, where the grid-based template shape for a circle with exact square root of 2 measurement would be this kind of geometry, where every grid space here is within but not outside of the 30-foot radius based on the assumed diagonal movement rule. Now we can change again from exact to, for example, the very popular alternating 1-to-1 diagonal rule that is used very commonly with like D&D or other systems. So let's change the square grid diagonal movement rule to alternating 1-to-1, and we'll keep grid-based template shapes turned on. Now we need to reload the engine, and now we get this as our circle. It's really kind of interesting to see the different sort of shapes that you get that are like geometrically accurate, conditional on the movement rule that you apply. So, like, why does it look like this? Well, it looks like this because these are the squares for which you are 30 feet or less from the template origin, according to a alternating 1-to-1 movement rule. Now, you won't find this in a rule book because it's like too complicated to write this in a rule book. However, if you were to measure like how far from the template origin can you get with a 1-to-1 alternating movement, this is the rules accurate shape that you would have for like a 30-foot fireball. So it's not everyone's cup of tea. I'm not sure it's even my cup of tea. I don't know how I feel about this, but I do know that it's very cool, and it is powerful that Foundry can do this and put to bed some of the rules debates about like how big should the fireball be if diagonal movement costs a certain amount. So this allows for linking those things in a formalized way. And of course, things like a cone template as well get these kind of funky geometric shapes on the end of the cone, which really accurately gives you like which grid spaces would be within range of a 45-foot cone if your diagonal movement rule is alternating 1-to-1. So yeah, a lot of like nerdy deep dive into grid measurement, but this is the mind of a madman. Eber worked a lot on grid options, grid measurement, grid configuration. We did some major grid changes in V12. So yeah, anyways, I think this is pretty exciting stuff. You won't find this template in your printed rulebook, but I look forward to doing some play testing with it because, you know, if your cone is 45 feet long, then like the length of the cone should be the amount of distance that you can move 45 feet of movement. So I think there is like a lot of like rules elegance to being able to link these things together. Last thing to share, of course, there is still the rounded versus flat cone template shape that hasn't changed, but the grid-based template shapes, that is new. Yeah, you get some really weird shapes if you do like rectilinear movement, where diagonals are twice as expensive as straight. You get like diamonds and things. It's pretty cool. Anyways, yeah, enjoy that. Look forward to seeing how people use it, and I look forward to seeing the rules debates, not only about what the rules actually are or what the rules should be, but rules debates about like which Foundry grid measurement settings are the correct ones. Let's see what else we got. Some improvements to particle effects, dice cards, localization, other changes. Yeah, I think that's about it. I think that's probably a good place to stop, at least to stop and then take questions. You've all been a really great audience. I appreciate all the interest and all the questions, and I hope, folks have found this to be entertaining and interesting to see like a glimpse at all of the pretty unique stuff that we're working on. And that we have done for V12. So I'm going to stick around for another, 10, 15 minutes, however long it makes sense to stay for. And I'm going to take questions from the group. So if you have any questions before I wrap up, please drop those questions into chat. And I'll just kind of show off some stuff randomly while I do that and while I take questions from the audience. Red Dog MT, thanks for the stream. Do you plan to implement legends for other assets like tiles? Yeah, I mentioned this earlier in the stream. I think the new legend for the regions is like a new idea that we haven't, it's a new up and coming idea, and so we're gonna see how it looks, how it works, and it's the kind of idea that I wouldn't be surprised if we make other canvas layers have a similar legend in the future. It seems like generally a sort of useful thing to exist. Question from Nocturnal: is it possible to specify the radius or diameter of the token rings in the API? The diameter of the token ring is linked to the width and height of the token. So the hitbox of the token defines the size of the token ring. And in fact, the system comes pre-packed, or the Foundry comes pre-packed with multiple rings. So for example, the rings graduate to higher fidelity visual assets, so you don't lose detail on the ring as your token size scales up. So maybe this isn't the best token to demo it with. I'll choose one that has a little bit of a smaller footprint. Yeah, so if this becomes like a 3x3 creature, we actually move to a higher resolution ring. So the size of the ring is dictated by the scale of the token and the width and height of the token that you're using. I see, Nocturnal, that answer does not fully satisfy, so if you let us know what would fully satisfy, this is the right moment for feedback. Maybe not this in Twitch chat, but like in Discord or on GitHub or somewhere, share some V12 feedback with us about how you want it to work for your use case. Let's see, Christian asks, where can we research more about App V2? Documentation is coming later, always kind of the last thing to come together, Christian. I think for now, what I would suggest as the best place to research is to actually look at the implemented application V2 examples that are in core now. So user config, region legend, all of the setup screen, region config, behavior config, anything that extends application V2 or document sheet V2, look at those as examples. It's in many ways very familiar to application V1, but there are key differences. So kind of looking at examples is probably the best advice I have to offer at the moment. Question from Graham Negative: how much work do you envision it being to convert an established system from template JSON, I assume is what that would have been, to the data model format? It's not necessarily a trivial amount of work. it can be a fair bit of work, I would say. But I think if you approach it gradually, it's really worthwhile. One comment on that note that I didn't mention today, template.json itself is actually no longer a required file for systems to have full stop. So like the existence of a JSON template file can itself completely go away. And I've done that. I haven't done much with Crucible lately. I wish I had more time for it, but hopefully, as you can see from all the stuff we demoed today, I have been busy. Crucible, though, the current branch of Crucible does away with the template JSON file completely in favor of exclusively data model definitions. And so there's a nice example of that you can see there. It is work to do it, but the number of benefits that you get from moving to data models for the system just sort of keeps compounding and keeps stacking up and stacking up. So the value proposition is only going in one direction there. It will eventually be ideal for your system to do that. Dex Starglow, any news about touch support for the canvas? We have an open issue about some problems there, and that issue is scoped for work during user testing 1. So during our next milestone, that issue is scoped for work. You can follow along with the GitHub issue for further updates. We're not going to be like adding comprehensive touch support, but we are working to undo some of the damage that was done evidently in V11 that we didn't actually know about. So we're working to kind of repair some things that got broken unintentionally. Question from Christian: what document types support embedding? I'm not sure off the top of my head. I think it's other journal pages and roll tables at the moment. I think it's just those two. I think support for additional embed types is something that can be extended, but I think at the moment core, I think it's just roll tables and other journal pages. Guitar Guy Nick: how does scene triggers affect premium modules, and what should a user reasonably expect? Since it's a new set of documents, since it's a new canvas layer, everything about scene regions is new. So like this scene, house divided, the grounds scene, like there's no impact on premium content for the addition of regions. It's just that this content doesn't have scene regions yet. So, you know, there's sort of like no downside. It's nothing that like will break or nothing that like no longer works. It's just that like that feature doesn't exist yet. It's not used yet. Now what I'm imagining that we, of course, as the creators of this one, but like other creators will do is they'll, you know, get around to, okay, I'm going to define that like this cottage, ruined cottage is a scene region, and, you know, these sorts of things like will start showing up in premium content where like, you know, certain areas of scenes and things will end up being scene regions that have certain behaviors, and like that will become to a certain extent a standard of like what makes content premium for Foundry, is like how well integrated is it with scene regions among other things. That's what will make premium content truly premium. But there's no problem with premium content or any content not having scene regions. It's the same as like a map that doesn't have light sources, you know? It's okay that a map doesn't have light sources, but if you add light sources to the map, then it will have them. Let's see. Question from Latharn: will there be auto buffering for sounds in the playlists? Games, I have severe desync of the music. There are a bunch of audio improvements in V12, so there isn't the exact feature you are asking for or describing, but there are a lot of things that makes V12 better in that regard. So I encourage you to check it out. I hope you'll experience improved audio performance in V12. It's something that I worked on personally. I worked on audio improvements quite a lot in V12. I'm proud of those changes. Although I wish my respective volume sliders worked. That's probably like my biggest failure of the day, that my environment slider didn't do what I expected it to. Could there be a setting for music to be controlled globally via the GM to affect PC's volumes too? That's what the volume level of the playing track does. So this volume level of the playing track affects everybody, not just yourself. These user volume controls are just you. So for the GM, I want this music to be loud, but the player still has their own volume slider. So both those volume sliders interact to define the final playback volume. All right, let's see. Question from City No Doors. Can new darkness have different textures like mist, or be visible with special visions? We're going to do some animation for darkness sources in the next release. So stay tuned for the next stream, and I'll hopefully have an answer to show you on that. Red Dog MT asks, will region triggers support firing for each square a token moved within a large region, like for difficult terrain? Yeah, so one of the things I didn't show, and I probably don't have an easy way to show it like immediately right now, but imagine there's like a big rectangular region, long region. One of the things you can do with a script behavior in this region, say, is you can subscribe to the token either before token moves or after token moves, and those events trigger for any amount of token movement in the region, and you know how much the token moved in the region. Like, you have the segmentation of movement. One of the cool things about before token moves is events that operate on before token move can actually modify the movement that is done. So like if you needed to reduce the total length of movement, or you needed to break or interrupt movement or redirect movement, like events that operate in the before token moves event can actually change the movement vector. Events that operate in the after token moved event, those cannot change the movement vector, but you do get to learn the entire segmentation of like what exactly the token did. So like how far did the token move within the region? Did the token move into the region, out of the region? You get a full segmentation of movement in this event. So it's very powerful for all kinds of computation. For things like difficult terrain, that would probably either be something that you do as part of the ruler measurement integration. So rather than like doing it as a region behavior, it would be more like you would define a region of difficult terrain, and then you would make it to where your ruler measurement, when you measure distance in that region, that ruler measurement gets a increased cost function. Alternatively, you could do something like, adjust the movement distance that's possible to do inside a difficult terrain region. But these are things like we're still kind of figuring them out as we go, and we've got lessons to learn, and so do the module developer community have lessons to learn about like how do we make these tools work, and there's going to be more development needed, I'm sure. Question from Kai M. Sil, will your premium modules get updates to use the new features? Absolutely. We have some updates coming for both Demon Queen and House Divided. I don't have timelines to say exactly on that yet, but both Demon Queen and House Divided and other products or projects that we might or might not be making will have those features built in, for sure. Let's see. Let me take a couple more questions. My voice is starting to get a little tired, so I'm probably going to wrap up pretty soon here. But question from Mooman: will embeds be configurable per system? If you want to embed an actor in a journal, can the system define the path for the how that embed looks? I'm certain that the answer to that is yes. I need to look up how. I didn't do that feature. That's a Kim feature, and I don't actually know the answer to it. I'm guessing it's some sort of config that specifies the embeds. I'm just taking a quick search for embed and seeing if anything jumps out. I'll have to get back to you on that, Mooman. But I'm certain the answer is yes. I just don't know what to tell you right off the top of my head. Ping me in Discord and we'll figure it out together. Or better yet, ping Kim. Lord Zeal, oh wait, that's not a question. Miro Monti, is there an option to set up a map grid for the sake of grid reference with scale, color, and opacity, and no snap to grid for fluid movement? It's not possible what you're asking for in the UI. If a scene has a grid, then the grid is used. Although, of course, you can always bypass snap to grid for any particular movement as you will by just, by just holding shift as you're moving your character around. You can have exactly seamless movement on a gridded map, but it does require you to use that shift hotkey so that it doesn't snap. But, whether that's an answer to your question or not, depends on whether holding shift is too troublesome. All right, I'm just scrolling up a little bit. Question from Jinker: there's been a bug since V8 that rotating and resizing a tile shows the default orientation. Rotating and resizing tiles is a major pain in the butt. I don't think we're fixing it in V12. No, I'm sorry. I think this is just a part of the furniture now, that rotating a resized tile is awful. Someday that may be good, Jinker, but today is not that day. K-Walk, presumably you could use regions to add an active effect to change token walk speed. Yep, that is also a thing you could do. Like, as soon as you on enter or on exit the region, you could toggle an active effect on the token that is like in difficult terrain. There's lots of ways that the problem can be approached. I think between us on the core team also working on the D&D system, like, I think we're going to come up with a solution for how we think difficult terrain should be managed, but there's probably other ways to approach it. And, between us and the community of developers, I'm sure we will gradually identify what is the best way to deal with difficult terrain. But I think it's still kind of an open question. There's a lot of new tools in the toolbox. What we need to figure out is what's the best way to use those tools. Oh, nice. Okay, yeah. Kim has reminded me now, Mooman, that the answer to your question is that your actor class or your system data model can define a toEmbed method. And if you define a toEmbed, it allows that document, you can customize how that particular document type gets embedded. So that's quite powerful. Darksteel Spork, what about other adventure modules created by the Foundry team like Abomination Vaults? We're updating our the Pathfinder products that we create, so that's Beginner Box, Kingmaker, Abomination Vaults, Hero Deck, Token Pack. We're updating those all the time. Vivian on our team is very diligent about making those Pathfinder products better. I think updates to those to use new V12 features will happen as soon as possible, and as soon as the Pathfinder system supports V12. We'll start working on those, I'm sure. Because there's definitely some very fun things we could do in places like Abomination Vaults or Beginner Box. I mean, there's so much that can be done there with scene regions, for sure. Question from Latharn about House Divided for PF2. We've looked into it. It's something we'd like to do. It's a little bit complicated for a couple of reasons. It is a difficult adventure to approach conversion for. Maybe someday we'll support a PF2 version of House Divided. I'd like that. It's just costly to create. Question from Guitar Guy Nick is, if a PC enters an area that on token enter and on token exit, is there a feedback mechanism to the PCs so that they know they are affected? That depends entirely on the behavior. You could have certain event trigger, certain region behaviors that are sort of silent, like they secretly do something and you don't know. Or there could be certain region behaviors that very vocally display like a scrolling text or a pop-up or like an alert, or your token flashes red or the game pauses. So like the degree of feedback that's given is really up to the implementation of the behavior to decide how much feedback is appropriate. Oh, holes in regions, TXUS5012. Thank you. I really didn't demo that. I totally forgot to demo holes. Yeah, so let's make a rectangle. You know, a rectangle with hole is our region. Can't believe I forgot to demo this. And then while I have the region selected, I'll make say like a circular hole. And here we go. We got a hole in our region. And that hole in the region also counts for enter and exit events. So, you know, things that happen on entering or on exit, it does utilize the, you know, really precise geometry of the hole to understand, like, you know, I'm exiting, I'm entering. It's very, very powerful. Very powerful what you can do with that. Other really like common use cases for that would be like, imagine you have like an outdoor area. Like imagine the whole scene imagine like a cave, but there's like a little like outdoor piece of the cave. You could say like this whole region, like the whole map is the cave. And then let's see. Then we'll add like a hole shape. Imagine there's like an entrance to the cave over here. I might have done something wrong. What did I do wrong here? I don't know what I did wrong. Anyways, you get the idea. Maybe there's some issue with drawing the cave exactly on collinear with the canvas bounds. I'll have to look into that. Actually, I've somehow managed to sort of break the rendering here, so maybe it's a visual issue. I don't know. Nope. Even more and more curious. I see what I did. Okay, I drew a hole first. That would be the wrong thing to do. So if I have this, and then I draw like an outside bit. Yeah, there we go. So like, okay, so it could be something like this, where you have like a inside of the cave, but then you like cut away a little outside bit or something like that. So that could be a way that you use like, you know, two shapes, one of which is a hole and one of which is not a hole. So yeah, really powerful that you can do that. You can cut away parts of a region as well as adding to it. It does have a small performance cost using holes, so like be thoughtful, be sparing. Only do it if you really need to do it. But like, yeah, you can create some very exact geometries when you need to by taking away, you know, parts of the region, and then you get kind of the exact geometry that you need. Hole responsibly. No, Guitar Guy Nick, there's no circular walls. There's just a polygonal approximation of a circle of a suitable density that it looks circular. All right, I think I got to wrap up here. I'm pretty wiped out, and this has been a long stream, but thank you all very much for all of the really excellent questions and your engagement, your curiosity. It's been great hanging out with all of you today. I really appreciate all the feedback, all the enthusiasm. I'm really excited for V12 to continue getting closer and closer to stable. There's still some kinks to work out, as you've seen during the stream, but we're going to keep hammering all those rough edges down, and I'm looking forward to us releasing a really stable and excellent V12 sometime next month. So it is coming, and it is coming soon, so get hyped for that, and we'll all be playing with scene regions soon enough, as well as all of these other really fun features. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. Stay in touch on Discord, on social. Stay in touch, especially during the month of May. We're going to be doing a lot of things that I'm very excited about and look forward to showing and talking with each of you about. There's some big announcements coming, and so stay ready for that. Keep an ear to the ground. Coming up next month, V12 stable is just the tip of the iceberg of things that's coming in May. So get ready for that. And yeah, I'll see you all again soon. Have a good one. Cheers. Bye-bye. Happy gaming. Until next time.